Welcome everybody, it's Business Monday here at GoLocal Live. The sun is shining, it's a little windy, a little cold, but it's a big day on Business Monday. It's kicking off with Hannah Morini from Green Development down in North Kingstown, project manager overseeing arguably the fastest growing energy company in Rhode Island. You guys have gotten big. Give a little overview of where's Green Development these days.
Green Development, we are a local renewable energy company. We develop everything from solar to wind, hydro. We're getting into some battery storage. We currently employ 55 people in Rhode Island. We're actively hiring for electrical engineers, civil engineers, a little plug.
So if you've got your resume, send it to Hannah.
We do it, and energy technicians for our projects as well. Everything's going really well in the state right now. We're growing. Really, there's a lot of diverse projects that we're involved with right now. It's exciting. Very exciting times in Rhode Island.
So I started my career, I worked for John Chafee down in Washington. I worked on environmental issues, and I was at DEM. And you know, during those periods of time, the idea that renewables, wind and solar, could be price competitive and could be wildly viable to really be the backbone of, you know, Rhode Island's, the nation's, the world's energy sources, it's just wildly exciting. It's such a transformation in, you know, 25 years. Talk a little bit about sort of where you see the whole thing going and what pressure that is and what excitement that is for you guys.
So truly, I mean, the goal of the industry has been for decades, how do we get to grid parity with fossil fuels? How do we make it so that you don't need special subsidies, of course, beyond what fossil fuel companies receive, but how do you get to the point where the costs are competitive so that choosing renewable energy isn't just the green choice, it's the financial choice as well? And I'd say that we're getting to a point that it's almost become a reality. The question is, can we stabilize that and keep it so? And I think part of the reason that we've gotten to very close to grid parity is because we've actually been able to build projects at a larger scale. And with larger projects, the ratepayer, of course, is paying a lower price per unit, or a kilowatt hour, than they would from a smaller project. So although we're not in offshore wind at Green Development, I would like to use it as an example. The project that was built off Block Island a couple of years ago was small in terms of utility scale power at 30 megawatts. And that was in the 20s cents per kilowatt hour. Now you're looking at projects that are hundreds of megawatts offshore that are coming in at single digits. It's truly incredible. And part of the reason is economies of scale. So we hope that if we're able to continue on the trajectory of building bigger projects with strong economies of scale, then we'll continue to realize that goal of grid parity, or very close to it, and meet our energy goals, continue to grow the clean economy, and battle climate change, which is incredibly important for, you know, my generation and those in the future.
And my generation as well.
Yes.
You've got projects all over the state.
Yes.
One of the more recent one is up in Johnston, major wind project. But you're really building and initiating or developing projects around Rhode Island. What pressure is it, what complexity is it to do projects in nearly, 50% of the cities and towns across Rhode Island?
Rhode Island, one of the things that makes it really interesting and unique, I mean, you can spend a day in Rhode Island and you can be in Providence, you can go to Warren, you can go to South County, and everywhere feels different. Well, there's 39 different cities and towns. Everyone's got a slightly different way to do things. So there is some work, but I would say that the policy and regulations coming out of the Office of Energy Resources and the governor's office, they understand that there needs to be some things that are streamlined. So we have seen some streamlining in some tools that have come out to help municipalities kind of govern renewable energy. We've also seen some streamlining recently in the tax legislation that allows cities and towns to charge tangible taxes for renewable energy, which is it should be an incentive for those towns. So I would say it's complicated, but it's improving, and we want towns should be able to have a piece of the pie, so to speak, if they're interested.
Some of the projects you're doing now, North Smithfield, I believe, there's significant incentives to that community. I mean, you're going to be the biggest taxpayer, or nearly the largest taxpayer in that community, I think in the top 2 or 3.
True.
And that's a significant, there aren't a lot of new taxable projects that are going into suburban and rural communities in Rhode Island.
Right. Certainly, certainly there's not a lot of opportunity for new tax incentives without increasing taxes. So those cities and towns that are embracing renewable energy should certainly be commended because they are keeping the financial benefits right within their own community.
What's the biggest challenge as you go and develop these projects? I think, if you go to Europe, virtually everywhere you look around, there's huge wind projects. It melds into their landscape. It's not really given a second thought. We were in Ireland last summer staying at a place on the coast, and there's a peninsula that went out, and there were, 10, 15 huge wind projects, and it just sort of becomes part of the landscape there. There's no problem, there's no NIMBYism, there's no zoning against it. It's just sort of, hey, listen, we want to have a green economy, we're dedicated to it, and we understand that there's going to be a trade-off. We'd rather have that than smokestacks. Why don't we have that same cultural approach to things here, not just in Rhode Island, but in many communities across the country?
Well, I would like to start by saying that we work really closely with the manufacturers of the turbines that we build are German, and they often come to public meetings with us and they say, oh, I remember when people were this mad 20 years ago in Germany, and they've been through it, they persevered, and now it's part of the culture. But I think that it most likely, according to them, it was a fight, and it
wasn't always that magnanimous of relationship.
Right, and I think that we see the same thing here over time. Once projects are actually built, they're installed, they're doing what they're supposed to, and people are not negatively impacted by the projects. They do blend into the landscape. People get used to them, and I think that it's easier to recognize the benefit from a project once you actually see it up and running. It's very easy to be hesitant of the unknowns, but also as a developer, I've been doing this for 10 years now in Rhode Island. It's easy to get hung up on the negatives, especially if you look at one narrow project. You're never going to make everyone happy, truly. But if you look back at the big picture, how far we've come, the amount of projects that have been built, the amount of clean energy that's going onto the grid, we've made a big impact in Rhode Island. So I would say you have to focus on the big picture, the benefits that we're providing to the environment, the local economy, and don't get hung up on the negative because we're going in the right direction.
I would say we started in 2010 GoLocal, and Deepwater was just emerging as a project. I think about, it seemed like 20% favored the project, 80% were against. Folks on the South Coast, along South County, Narragansett, South Kingstown were opposed to it. People on Block Island were opposed to it. And now it's one of our proudest accomplishments as a state is that we were first with offshore. Go to onshore. The Johnston project, wildly embraced by Johnston, not so embraced by Cranston. How are we going to work through those issues of sort of getting all the communities to understand what the features and the benefits are? There have been windmills down at Narragansett Bay Commission for 10 years. And
Close to it.
And I don't think anybody has a second thought about those.
Sure, truly, we in the industry need to do a better job upfront communicating the benefits. The truth is that 98% of our electricity in Rhode Island still comes from natural gas, which is bad for not only is it bad for the environment, but it's sending those dollars out of state. Renewable energy is
And by the way, it doesn't always work, as we found out in Newport and Middletown during the course of the winter.
Think about all the things that can go wrong when you're piping in a fuel across state lines. Local energy, with every project, we are putting in at least tens of thousands of dollars into the local distribution infrastructure, where renewable energy is improving the local infrastructure and the local grid, and it's making our grid more reliable. These are benefits, even if you hate the environment, even if you've never thought twice about it, there are financial and infrastructure benefits to investing in renewable energy in our state.
I also, relative to natural gas, it doesn't give you the warmest feeling when In the case of the supply company was a Canadian concern, and the distribution company here in Rhode Island, the power company, National Grid, is a UK company, both with controversial track records. I don't know. I'd rather go with local. I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's in our name, but I'd rather go with local.
Me too.
What do you see in the next few years? Where's Rhode Island going to be? Are we at the cutting edge? We look at lots of reports and lots of studies. Rhode Island seems to be better than average in the top tier of companies embracing renewables. Can we keep that up, and can we become really a national leader in leveraging renewable energies and decreasing, supply demands from out of state?
We are close to a national leader, I would say, right now. We've made great strides. It's taken a while, but we have some really competitive programs in Rhode Island right now that cities and towns can take advantage of in their ordinances. There's a lot of big energy users in Rhode Island saving significant money because of renewable energy. So I think we have a good foundation. I'd say we definitely have a chance to be a leader in the country. Not sure if we're going to catch up to Europe in the next 2 or 3 years. Maybe 10 to 15 we'll get there. But as far as potential in Rhode Island, it's huge. One of the biggest potentials that I can't wait to see play out is the potential for energy storage here in Rhode Island. So when a solar system produces electricity, the grid has to be able to take it right away. Well, we really use electricity most in Rhode Island at night when we go home and turn the lights on after work. So it would smooth out that production curve if we had storage that could release the power onto the grid when it's needed. So I think that's the biggest potential. It will make our grid even more reliable. It will shrink the amount of fossil fuels that are needed to run our state in a big way, because you won't have to have that built infrastructure when, if it's a cloudy day and you want to turn the light on, you don't have to worry about if the solar is going or not. So I think that storage is the biggest potential for growth in our industry and also for improvement of reliability of the grid in Rhode Island.
The government regulatory structure, let's just talk in Rhode Island, the governor is a strong proponent of creating incentives and growing the renewable. Is there still barriers within the state regulatory structure? Does everybody get it? Do they understand that they've got to make this streamline, that they've got to allow investment, that they've got to allow innovation?
I think one of the benefits of working in a small state is that we are, there's an open line of communication with people who want to see this happen. To encourage better policy, we can go to the State House, there's working groups, there's different ways to get involved and communicate to the regulators what needs to happen. I think the biggest thing that needs to be communicated better, and again, this is coming from our industry, is that any costs that are added to make renewable energy more expensive keeps that gap between the cost of fossil fuels and renewable energy wider. So if there are major regulations on where renewable energy is allowed to be built, how it's allowed to be built, different things like that, it can add to the cost, add to the development and construction costs of renewable energy, which does make it more expensive. So that's something, again, that we as an industry need to do a better job of communicating to both local cities and towns, but also to regulators.
Hannah, one of the biggest debates has been on cutting for the purposes of solar,
Yes.
large solar projects, and there's a number of different viewpoints. There's some folks on the environmental side who want to limit the amount of cutting. There's some folks who understand that it's a necessary part of the development of it, and it's a 25-year life cycle. It's not like it's being paved over and used for industrial purposes. And then there's folks in the agricultural industry who say, listen, I can't keep my farm if I don't put solar on it. No two ways about it. We're done. This is going to turn into housing development. How does that dialogue, debate affect your company as it begins to develop across the state?
So one of the important things to realize, and we would never, and I don't think any renewable, maybe another renewable energy developer would, but I highly doubt anybody would advocate for cutting in a protected land or a spot that could be protected. Public lands are sacred, and if they're protected, that's done, they're protected. But most of the landowners that we work with are coming to us and looking to add solar on a small piece of their property because it's either that or their choice is to sell it. This choice between it's either going to stay wooded or become a solar or wind project is a false choice. If the landowner could afford to keep it wooded or
Right.
afford to keep it exclusively in agriculture, they would not be talking to us. Their land is their livelihood, it's their heart and soul, and adding renewable energy to it really helps diversify their income to keep them solvent, essentially, as a family and as a business. So I think that it needs to be remembered that it's not just this or that. It's, well, how can we make sure that if a landowner does need to make a difficult choice, it's a temporary choice, such as solar or wind. Unlike housing, if you sell your farm for housing, it can't go back. You can't undo that. Whereas, I actually was just talking with a farmer today down in Exeter. They've been farming their whole lives best sweet corn. And he was saying that
Are you leveraging the show for hiring purposes and marketing sweet corn?
I'm drooling thinking about this corn. But so his children aren't really as interested in farming, but he has a grandson that he thinks might want to get into it. So he was actually just telling me today, I'm so excited that this is the choice that we made, because the solar project can get removed, and 25 or 30 years from now, if my grandson wants to continue with the sweet corn like what I'm doing now, he can do that. And if we sold this for houses instead, he's like, this would never go back. The other thing I wanted to mention about trees, I actually was doing a calculation for a meeting I'm going to tonight, right before I got in the car to come here, and a 2 megawatt solar project, where it occupies about 8 acres of land, maybe a little less. It is the carbon equivalence of 2,500 acres of trees. And that's according to the EPA's calculator. So trees have a lot of benefits, of course. We should protect the trees that are an option for protecting. But if you're talking about carbon to carbon, 1-to-1, it's about 40-to-1 that solar offsets more carbon than just U.S. forests.
I want to thank you for coming in, taking the time. For everybody who's staying tuned in, we've got some interesting discussion about aquaculture. It's a very green afternoon here in the small biz segment on GoLocal. We'll be back in about 30 seconds. Stay tuned, and we'll talk to you in a minute. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody, to Business Monday. I'm Josh Fenton. This is Jesse Bazarnik from Sweet Victory Aquaculture. It's a green afternoon. We just had Hannah Marini from Green Development on. Let's go to the water. Let's talk some aquaculture. Tell me what you're doing and how's it going?
Well, a little too windy to be out there today, but what I'm doing is just, it's ranching technically. That's the aquaculture term for it. You take small animals and you raise them until they're bigger and then you sell them. So
right.
We buy seed from recognized sources in the state. And we put them in what's deemed to be safe water. There's a lengthy application process.
Yeah.
I've gone through it 3 times. And I got myself a nice site in Dutch Harbor. It's a
nice.
Beautiful area, yeah. It's a really nice area. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm gradually going to be filling up my site over the next 2 or 3 years. I should be able to hold about 1.4 million oysters on there eventually.
And is oysters the play? Is that your sole staple?
Yeah, that's the only product I'm currently selling. A lot of other people do augment their permits to grow other types of seafood, be it scallops or kelp, that sort of thing. But I'm just going to stick to the oysters. I think it makes production go a little bit smoother when you're only dealing with one process.
So you're sitting on your couch one day and you say to yourself, gosh, you know, forget whatever I'm doing now. I want to be a oyster wrangler, right? Is that the process that takes place?
Not exactly, not exactly.
I've oversimplified it.
A little bit. I wasn't on my couch, actually. I was in my advisor's office in school at URI.
Excellent.
And I was trying to figure out exactly what to do with myself. And literally, in the process of looking through all the careers that were available, I saw oyster farmer, and it jumped out because it was much different than anything else. My imagination took hold, and I started picturing all kinds of things that it would be, and you know what, it's all pretty much true, except there's a lot more work involved. I learned this when I was working on Perry Rasso's oyster farm, the Matunic oyster farm. That was a really great experience for me there.
And how long did you work with him? I mean, he's sort of been at the forefront in Rhode Island.
Yes.
You know, first to market kind of situation, and now he's grown into really an entire supply chain of different fresh foods, not only to feed his restaurant, but others as well. What did you learn from him?
Wow. Well, the first thing I learned was the procedure of growing oysters, how to keep them happy, what you need to do to get them growing efficiently and keep them growing efficiently, and about all the things, how much labor is involved. There's an awful lot of work involved in that. Most important thing I learned from Perry, though, was his business acumen, his tremendous business acumen. One of the first things that he did after he got the farm going is he bought the nearby restaurant that all of us know and love, the Matunic Oyster Bar. I love eating there. And so that was a really terrific experience to watch that unfold in front of me. Did a massive upgrade to the facility and his capabilities there while I was working there. That was really neat to watch too. I did, the main thing that I enjoyed about that farm though is just working with the guys out on the water. That was a really great experience for me. I learned an awful lot from people who been there for a while. So
talk a little bit about what your day is like. I mean, is it, I'm in the office early, then I'm out on the water, then I'm
Not a lot of office time.
Not a lot
That's
of
why
office
I
time.
chose this profession, oddly enough. No, there's very, very little in terms of paperwork, things of that nature. I pay the bills once a month. That's about it.
Great.
But mostly I get out on the water. I flip over the cages, see what's going on, and then make sure they have the appropriate stocking density for the size. I take stock of what is in the water and when I'm going to be able to harvest something. I do that almost every chance I get, so I'm constantly updating my information. They grow fast, and they don't all grow at the same pace, so you have to separate the large ones from the small ones, or they'll eat all the food.
Right.
And the small ones won't get anything. You put all the big ones in a bag together, upstream is where I put them. And so that's pretty much what my day consists of, that and fixing my boat.
And then where are you selling them to? How are you driving revenue to the farm?
Selling oysters is, I come from a 20-year sales background.
Yeah.
And when I was thinking of a product that I'd like to sell, because when I was sitting down in that advisor's office at URI, I was thinking, I want to make a product and sell it. And then I'm thinking about the headaches involved with selling and dealing with customer service and that. I wanted to streamline as much as I can. So I found a product that has infinite demand, limited supply. You can make it right here in Narragansett Bay. There's about 70, 75 oyster farms at this time that are in existence. all they need to do is bring them to a wholesaler. They take all of them. If I really want to get a little bit more money for them, then I can start selling to some of the seafood distributors around. They do pay about 10 cents a piece more for them. So I can augment my income by visiting some of those guys. I do work with some seafood distributors like that, but mainly wholesalers. If I produce 2,000 oysters in a week, there's no way anyone who's got 5 or 6 locations can possibly absorb them all.
Great. You tapped into Commerce RI and CIC in getting some seed funding to help you develop to the next level.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about what you worked on them with and then what the process was.
Well, it was a relatively easy process. One of the things I sold during my extensive sales experience was finance, commercial as well as residential or finance. A lot of mortgages, also a lot of SBA loans, equipment leases for businesses, that sort of thing. So to me, the process was relatively easy. I had to give them a couple pieces of paper that I forgot about. I also had to give them a couple of pieces of paper that became outdated during the process of it, but it was a pretty smooth loan application. It was lengthy because most SBA lenders do take their time for just logistical reasons. They have to.
Yeah.
But it got done, and I'm grateful for it, and I'm looking forward to putting a lot of oysters on a lot of plates.
How big can you get with your existing permitting, and what's the next step for the company?
What do you mean big?
How much larger? Do you keep growing? Do you expand the farm? Do you take out further permits, or are you satisfied with where you are and what you've got? Can you grow it to a level of efficiency that's dynamic?
The life cycle of the eastern oyster around here is approximately 18 months, from about this big to plate size.
Yeah.
And I can fit over 1 million oysters on my farm if it's decked out properly with equipment, and I can move all of them within, say, 18 months or so.
Yeah.
Continually seeding, continually harvesting, that's my capacity. So if you do the math on that, I'm not really going to need to have much help. I'll need some. I will need a second boat at some point. I need to finish making the sorter that I started to build. Things of that nature, just small logistical details. But yeah, if I ever max this site out, I won't need any more money. I really won't. I mean, if I decide that I do, then yes, it's possible to go ahead and do that. Narragansett Bay used to be 20% oyster farms, and now there's a tiny, tiny sliver of a fraction of that in there right now. We can fit a lot more farms in the bay.
What do you see next for the company? Where do you go next?
I need a better trailer. If anyone's got a heavy-duty trailer for a 20-25 foot
This
boat,
is now becoming the barter interview system.
I will pay you with oysters.
Hannah used it to recruit some electrical engineers. Yep. You need a trailer. If you've got a trailer, look him up. We'll have it all embedded with connections to his company tomorrow on GoLocal. How is Rhode Island as a small business person?
Rhode Island's the king of small businesses. There's more small businesses here than any other state per capita. I don't think it's as friendly as it could be. I think the governor needs to work on that a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's pretty good right now.
Give any suggestions, and the reason why they actually have an effect. Liz Tanner was on here last week. She's the head of Department of Business Regulation. She regulates everything from liquor stores to banking regulation, and she's about as responsive a regulator as I've ever seen in the state in the last 30 years. So give a couple of suggestions of how Rhode Island could improve.
First of all, there's absolutely no reason why there should be a demand for Rhode Island entities becoming Nevada or Delaware corporations. That shouldn't be happening. And I'm probably about to do it myself unless somebody can do something for me to prevent that from happening.
Yep.
It shouldn't be in my best interest to do that. It's certainly not in the state's best interest, and they seem to be turning a blind eye to it. Another thing that's very important is helping businesses grow. How do you grow? Well, for me, I would need a facility with a walk-in cooler so I can get on the interstate shippers list. I can't just throw my oysters in the back of my pickup truck and start driving around selling them. That's highly illegal. But I can put them in a cooler and have someone like Pangea Seafood up in Boston buy them from me. The reason this is important is now 100% out-of-state revenue is going into my bank account and getting spent around the state. Instead of selling them to a bunch of local bars, we're just churning up the same revenue. We're not bringing out-of-state money in. That's got to be the focus.
That's great. Jesse, I want to thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Trailer, folks, hit him. We'll have the links.
22 feet with a keel. I need rollers, not slides.
Rollers, not slides. You heard it here at GoLocal Live on the Small Biz Show. Thanks so much,
Thank
Jesse.
you.
Really appreciate you coming in. And we'll be right back in about 10 minutes with Next Up. Thanks, everybody.
Nice to see you folks.